And sure, I should be able to just see the documents, docs, notes, keynote is not here. Let me just share the whole screen. Keynote, actually. Yeah, I'll do that. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Okay, so let me just move this thing away. And you need to tell me how to get rid of the notes. There's like a
If you hit if you hit
spoiler.
play, if you hit play on the left
Uh,
of center at the top,
oh yeah, play.
and hopefully, oh, it does full screen if that's okay for you.
Fine, and I
Um,
have, and that's
yeah,
fine. Yes. Oh, I'm
cool.
thinking that let me reverse this. Okay.
Yep, and
So
that's
this was the
okay.
first one, right?
Yep. But if we could just, I mean, move ahead to this is the introduction and the bad stuff, which included the Iron Man, and then my luggage is next,
Oh my God. Yeah.
and then next the good stuff. Everything else, my hotel is the next thing with the nice breakfast, and we're almost caught up. One more slide. That was my hotel breakfast, and then the next slide is the map. We should finally be caught up to where things are. Okay, cool. Um, so yeah, this is where I was at, which is I was saying that like partially because of the Iron Man, the conference itself is in Rapperswil, which is down here in up go back.
Sorry. I'm just trying to click on it. It
Yeah, you can't
elsewhere.
click. Yeah.
Um, it maxes out both. Sorry.
Yeah. And so anyway, yeah. So the conference is like there in Rapperswil, and which is already, you can see quite a distance from Zurich, but it's a really gorgeous area right there on on Lake Zurich or the Zurich Sea. But yeah, I didn't see Zurich at all except for the airport and the train station because we were so far away. And then over here in Wald, on the far right, is where my hotel was. But really, I mean, it's kind of far away as a half hour train ride to the conference from there. But it's gorgeous Swiss countryside and a nice Swiss train. So doing that ride each morning and evening was totally good. So you can next slide. And yeah, and so like I said, yeah. So the trains are great, and except for the one time when I the first night I hung out a bit too long in Rapperswil and learned that the good trains, stop running and they start running less frequently. The trains that still run, they have to then connect to a bus. So that night I had a slightly long trip back to my hotel, but I learned my lesson. I just made sure I was on the good timetable for the rest of the trip. But uh, but yeah, the trains are great and everything. So now taking the train, we finally got into the conference. You can go to the next slide. And so yeah, here's the schedule. And you can see, I mean, some of the stuff is food, like when dinner and stuff were, but definitely there's, talks every morning, some things about presentations, and like there's these tracks, like there's beginner tracks and advanced tracks going on each day. Um, so those are like, there's a lot of stuff you can do if you want to go to talks. And there's actually 2 days before this, there's a Haskell ecosystem workshop and the Haskell implementers workshop, which I wish I could have gone to those things. But again, with like having my recent move and just having to plan things late, it really wasn't an option for me to spend 2 more days there. So I only got to be there for the conference proper. But next time I get to go, I'll try to go to all 5 days of everything happening. Um, and yeah, so I'm not going to go through things necessarily chronologically. I'm just kind of going to group things a bit. So if we go to the next slide, I'll start with going through the talks, at least the talks that I went to. There are talks I didn't go to that seemed like they would be good. Like there was the first day, the advanced track had a dependent types talk in which they were um, walking you through implementing dependent pattern matching and uh, and that actually I went to that talk for a few minutes, But at that point, I had like had a few hours in the morning of like talking to people and stuff, and I could not focus at all. I was just like wanted to get back to, talking to everybody about everything. And so I could not pay any attention to what was going on. So I just like left there because in the past, I've definitely spent too much time at conferences just going talk, 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 and missing out on everything else that was going on around me. Uh, and so I'm trying to get myself to, just leave a talk if I'm not, if it's not good, but also if it's not where my brain's at the moment. And so I can get more out of the conference as a whole. So we can skip the next slide. The first talk was really great. It was Simon Peyton Jones, one of the creators of GHC and Haskell. And he gave a talk on this programming language he's working on at what company is it? It's related to Unreal. Who makes the Unreal Engine? Epic Games? Yes, Epic Games. So he works at Epic Games, surprisingly working on a logic programming language, functional logic programming language there, which seems very like off the wall just in terms of like, I'm surprised it's something that a gaming company is putting this kind of effort and funding and everything into, but it seems really cool. So I think that Verse is not generally available, but maybe that's not true. It might be available in some way, but there's not much like in terms of their like GitHub or things like that. But every once in a while, Simon will give a talk somewhere talking about some of the crazy things going on in Verse, and he did so in this talk, and kind of about the type system and things like that, and how what he called a lenient, as opposed to like we often in the Haskell world talk about things being strict or lazy, which is kind of about how things are evaluated or if they even get evaluated. In Verse, Simon talks about it being a lenient language, which is that everything will eventually be evaluated, but the order in which it's evaluated is flexible, like a lazy language. Like things can be reordered in order to figure out how it's solving things. So in a logic programming language, you don't have a lot of order necessarily. Like putting things, in sequence doesn't necessarily mean that's an order. And so Verse will rearrange things for evaluation in order to find solutions to things. But everything will eventually be evaluated like a strict language. So anyway, he's calling that lenient. That was really interesting. He talked a lot about how the type checker works in there, which is again another kind of wild thing where it's I don't think it comes up on the slide that I snapshotted here, but a type in a Verse is just a partial function, like a function that can fail. And so if it fails, which also means something more like Prolog than like what it means in like Haskell or something, right? Failure just means like it's like kind of a no result case, whereas like expressions in general can return any number of results. And so it's basically just like an empty result set, not like an exception or something like that. It doesn't stop execution. It's just like hey, we didn't find anything that matched that. So types in Verse are these partial functions, and so if they return some non-empty set, then the type checked. And type checking can also like transform the values and stuff like that go through. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I'm sure these talks will be posted online at some point. And it's one that I'm going to watch again. I think it's a really, really interesting stuff. They're just kind of, it's functional, but it's so far out there and so different from doing actual Haskell. It's really interesting. So we can go to the next slide.
So this is
Yeah.
more or less like a dependently typed programming language, but not really in the classic sense.
Right. Yeah, I think I would say, yeah, not really in the classic sense, but in the way that like since types are just functions, kind of thing, it's like, but it's more like everything that kind of one layer, and you don't have like type erasure or anything like that, right? Because you like actually need to like execute these functions at various times, and so, yeah, I would definitely different than dependently type programming, but I can see those parallels with like how types work. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's pretty interesting. And the same thing I mentioned on that slide just is that patterns work the same way. Um, any expression can also be used as a pattern. So kind of like view patterns in Haskell, but it's just like the way things work by default for pattern matching, which is really interesting.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, a lot of cool stuff there. But again, I don't think it's something we can just get our hands on and play with yet, unfortunately. Um, so the next talk, which I don't have a photo for, unfortunately, but Evan, who is the creator of the Elm programming language, um, gave a really good talk on kind of how to popularize functional programming, like and what's worked for him, because Elm has taken off in a lot of ways, and especially for a language with such a small, I would say, not that Evan doesn't have other contributors, contributing to language and stuff like that, but it's like a small core and definitely not like the committees and everything that Haskell has and stuff like that. It's really impressive the amount of adoption and everything. And so as like, and just some of the stuff he talked about was, often when we're talking about how do we get adoption into our favorite languages, we're always thinking about like, not always, but often thinking about how are we convincing other developers to like, to adopt this language or like to do the things that we like to do. Partially probably just because it's easy for us to think about like what would sell us and like what is really compelling. But with Elm, very, very explicitly like went for like, how do we convince businesses that there's a good reason um, for using this thing? And um, so yeah, so one of the things is that Elm is a pretty small language, and so part of the way that they pitch this, or that they have found success with, is like being able to hire non-Elm developers to a company and get them very productive in Elm in a short period of time, like 1 month, which is not that different from like getting JavaScript developers familiar with the new framework, whatever is gonna whatever next thing takes over, and but kind of getting those things on par where you get, productivity in a new language at the same speed as you would in a new, framework for a popular language. Um, and so so with Elm being a fairly small language, it's fairly easy to get people, newly onboarded. Um, and it's also a stable approach because you're not, if you're trying to hire, like often is the case with Haskell companies, is they're like looking for Haskellers, right? They're like, oh, do you do Haskell? Like, let's bring you on. But that relies on a bunch of stuff. Like, you want your company to be seen as, being good for Haskellers. So you might have some high profile Haskellers who work there, who give talks at conferences and things like that. Um, and you're reliant also on there being, people still, in that language because it's cool and popular or whatever. Um, Among the developers, if not among companies. But that's like a very kind of unstable way to go about bringing people on, because maybe your high profile Hasklers get a cool job somewhere else and you lose that kind of cachet of being an attractive place for Hasklers to go. Or maybe the market shifts, or not the market, but like the cool stuff that people are working on shifts, and Haskell devs become more sparse than they already are. So if you can shift things so that you can hire kind of anyone and get them, using this language, that's a much more stable way to keep, being able to supply your need for developers, than if you're just relying on, being attractive to that niche as it is. So there's a lot of stuff in this talk. And they had a lot of case studies about like with the companies that use Elm and how, the things that have worked for them that have been a problem for those various companies. And yeah, and so I don't know, a lot of stuff like that. It was again another really good talk. And so again, all of these will be online in the near future. So I'm like kind of just giving some recommendations as to, or like things that might give you whether or not you want to see that talk, and you can check them out. So you can go to the next one, um, which I thought was a really great talk. My screen didn't change, but this is Mike Sperber, who is a host of the Haskell Interlude podcast. And he runs BobConf, which happens, or no, I think it happened in March. It happens in Marchish each year, and that happens in Germany, in Berlin, where he lives. And he's a great speaker. He's been a teacher for a long time, so he gave maybe it wasn't even like I would say a talk. It was part of the advanced track, and sort of about like teaching Haskell, ostensibly teaching Haskell to loved ones, but didn't really get into like that aspect of it, which I was hoping we would, because I have a teenager who's done a bunch of stuff from when she was very little, like with circuitry and soldering, and now programming and stuff and robotics. But as she's gotten older, I've had less influence in what she does. So she does a lot more, say, C++ and JavaScript and Python than I would like. But I try not to push her on what she does because I'm happy she's doing it at all. Um, and so anyways, I was hoping for some of the focus on, how to teach loved ones in particular. But it was very interesting to talk about like the research that's been done in education and like things like SICP, which as functional programmers, many people are very familiar with. It was like the intro to programming book used at MIT for decades, and also some other places like Berkeley. Um, but it actually has not historically had good outcomes in terms of results. It has um, I don't know how Mike phrased it exactly, and of course, like any of my summaries of these talks are very much, maybe a bit distant from the actual content as I'm remembering them. But like the outcomes are not necessarily great. Where it's like you get like a handful of people who are like really just lock in and like, oh, this is amazing, and they get it and whatever. And kind of as Mike was saying, is like almost no matter what you're teaching, you know what you're basing that teaching on. If you're not a terrible teacher, you're going to get some small portion of the people who just like are like, oh, this is it, like I get it. But like, does it work for everybody? Does it work well for bringing the whole class up to a certain level? And SICP apparently has not had that kind of success, despite being such a classic among functional programmers and like including myself and stuff like that. And so like there are other books that have been developed on other teaching styles. How to Design Programs is one. And I unfortunately don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I think it's called Write Your Program or something like that. But it's in German, so it's like Schreib dein Program. And is it written by Mike Sperber? And it's very similar. Well, maybe a similar approach to how to design programs, but a different um, content and everything like that. But about like kind of how the different approaches to teaching work and that things like that we often talk about as engaged functional programmers and people who are passionate about the stuff we do, that like, oh, you give people like like the tools and let them like teach themselves, and you just make it possible for everybody to like learn on their own at their own pace and follow the things that they're really interested in. That actually doesn't really work for most people. There's always like a 5% of whatever group you're in that will really latch onto that kind of thing, but for the bulk, that's not like a well-structured way to go about it. Um, but I think I forget, this is a quote from something in the talk, but it was like that people are naturally curious, but not naturally good thinkers. So while they might be interested in something, like the idea of just like letting them loose at it doesn't mean that they're actually going to come away with like good knowledge or good understanding of it, because they're kind of just flailing at it. And again, only some portion of the class is going to be interested enough to go down that path in the first place, let alone then founder on trying to actually figure everything out at depth. Um, and one cool thing in Mike's talk is that he oh, you have to go to the next slide. Forget it's not me. He talked about he was talking about like this approach of like building a combinator library, and this is like something that's very helpful and like works really well for like getting people to understand things. And he commented that there's only ever been one book about how to write combinator libraries, and it is the book Algebra Driven Design, written by Sandy McGuire, who used to be regular at these meetups back in the days when they were in person and when he lived in Denver, which he does not anymore. But he was a former local, so got a shout out in this talk uh, about building combinator libraries. So I thought that was pretty neat. So you can go to the next slide. And so yeah, so Vaibhav, I always get that wrong. He gave an interesting talk, how to stop writing Haskell, which is of course tongue in cheek, but kind of talked about the ways that Haskell projects often fail, or how yeah, like a lot of case studies basically without naming names. Again, it had like 10 or so different like um, things that happen that lead to companies stop using Haskell. But one of the things he led with, which I thought was good, is like for a company to stop using Haskell, they have to have started using Haskell in the first place. So every failure story is kind of a success story at some level. We have companies adopting it in the first place, and companies all over the place, switch languages, re-implement something in something else. But the more popular that language is overall, the less that kind of thing reflects on the language itself. And, the more it's just like, oh, whatever, we just needed to make this change and like doesn't affect, JavaScript or Python or like whatever, like, it's not blamed on the language. And so is a more niche language, Haskell tends to take the blame when those kind of changes happen. But he talked about just some of the things are like, and it was kind of painful for having been at various companies that are either the company's folded or they've stopped using Haskell or whatever, and like feeling these different stories that he talked about, like, oh yeah, I've lived that one and that one. But sometimes it's like there's one person in the company who is like gung ho, and it's kind of like you know, um, the company wants to keep that person around, or they like have whatever importance, and they like bring Haskell in, and they're like, yeah, this is what we're building it, we're doing this, this, and this. And when that person either sometimes they just get tired of Haskell, like, oh, that was a fun experiment, it's over, or that person leaves the company and they were like the thing holding Haskell there. It wasn't like a larger company culture. um, those things will fade away. um, you have yeah, acquihires. This just happened recently to Garnix, which is very sad. The Garnix is a Nix CI system that I used to build all of my projects, Haskell and otherwise, on, and they were just acquihired by Shopify. But so the service itself is being shut down, but all the people working at Garnix are going to be working at Shopify. And so that system going away is very upsetting because I use it so much. I had to find some alternative, and I'm not sure what exactly I'm going to go. Though later I'll mention one possibility. Yeah, and so anyway, there's a bunch of things like that. He went through like 10 or a dozen different kind of case studies, or like the patterns that show up. Um, and also that it's not really Haskell specific. These things happen all over the place. But again, we see them in Haskell, and also they tend to be blamed on Haskell because it's a fairly niche language, so everything is seen as being an evaluation of the language. Um, and how do you as a Haskell programmer manage to survive these things happening? Like you want to keep writing Haskell, and so, like having basically options available, knowing where else there is that's doing Haskell, and having some public visibility such that, you are an attractive Haskell engineer. Something I brought up as a comment afterward that wasn't brought up in the talk was just, I've always worked to try to be working in open source and open source parts of the things I've been working on at companies, which is great for my own visibility, right? Like there's projects that people use, or, I get to talk about at conferences and things like that. But also it feels like even when Haskell disappears from a company, or I end up leaving a company, that project still exists. I still get to use it. I still get to see other people using it. It's not like, oh, that's just disappeared. Um, and so I find like that, getting things to be open source at your company, which I feel like companies have been pretty open to for non-core, functionality and stuff. In fact, I had a company that just actually signed over all the copyright to me because they didn't want to do anything with open source, but they're like, yeah, this is fine. You can open source all this stuff, but it's your stuff, not our stuff. I was like, great, that's fine by me. Um, and so anyway, yeah, so that was a good talk also about kind of like seeing the patterns that happen and how to kind of avoid those patterns, but also how to just protect yourself a bit when you see those patterns happening. Um, and okay, and then you can go to the next slide here. Make sure we're in sync. Yeah. So okay, that was all talks, and I went to those talks, and like I said, there was plenty more talks that I didn't go to, and yeah, there's just a lot of options. But the main thing that's going on at this conference is, it's a hackathon basically. It's like all these projects. So I didn't mention here, but there is like Haskell language server, right? The LSP server for Haskell, GHC itself. Um, what it was some, so this was working on HLint, which is like the linter, one of the linters for Haskell, pretty popular one. And so and yeah, so the idea is you like find these people with like-minded stuff. You want to be involved in a new project. The people working on that project are there, and you can like hop in and kind of get a lot of very hands-on training with getting into some new code, especially something like GHC, which is pretty intense. And people over the course of this conference will find an issue, start working on it, and get a PR up and often merged in during the conference, which is really cool. Um, and so here's some of the projects that I thought were pretty neat. I have links, but since I'm not screen sharing, I was gonna share my browser and stuff, but I'll kind of talk about things a little bit. Flora, which is flora.pm, is I probably am like underselling it here or misrepresenting it a bit, but it's a new Haskell documentation server, like Hackage or something like that. Um, Different style, and I think there's more to it that I haven't learned about yet. Um, but it looks pretty. It looks pretty neat. And it just says index everything. It groups things. I think is one of the things it does, which Hackage doesn't has. Hackage just has packages, whereas a lot of package repositories will like do things like GitHub, right, where you have like the owner of the thing and then a package name or repo name or whatever, and so you get name spacing that way. And so Florida stuff like that. So you could see one of the examples was like seeing everything that's Cardano related because they have tons of Haskell packages, and so you kind of get that kind of grouping and that sort of thing. But yeah, so that was a neat project that was getting some work done at the conference. I skipped over the Haskell 2010 formalization. I think that was being done in Agda. I'm not sure, but there was at least one person working on that. I don't know if they got additional contributors or not. But at the beginning of the conference, everybody kind of takes turns going up on stage and giving like a 30-second pitch for the thing that they're looking for other contributors to join in on that they're going to work on. And so these are some of those that I find interesting. Oh, the PureScript compiler, which is I was just talking about using PureScript earlier, so it's really cool that they're getting some work done. Cabal Matrix, which again I wanted to share what this is, but it's basically like a quick tool for like doing a complex build matrix, so you can kind of identify like which chunks of things have failure. So you can like say like, oh, I want to like try it with versions 0.2 to 0.8 of this library and 0 point whatever with 1 point through 1.2 of this other library, and it builds all the different combinations and sees exactly where you run into like some build failures, and so then you can like narrow it down and figure out where the bad interactions are actually happening. It's something I've wanted to adopt myself for a while, but I haven't actually gotten to use yet, but I hope to soon. It's a pretty neat tool. You can, I don't know, I'm sure there's a GitHub project for it, but if you search discourse.haskell.org, which is a great site for Cabal Matrix, you'll definitely find like the announcement of it. Cabal Vendor, which is kind of the opposite of some of my own work, but it was kind of interesting. So I'm interested in terms of like just seeing some of the dynamic, but it's like vendoring basically, where like via Cabal, where you can just kind of run some simple commands to pull in various your dependency graph basically into your repository, so you can like have vended versions of everything that you're working with. And the Haskell inspector is so there's been a big GHC stepping debugger effort with people from Mercury and I forget where else involved in getting that done, and that's been making a lot of progress. And this is a different project, a different debugger that doesn't require instrumentation, and it like works at a much lower level on like compiled programs. And it was pretty neat. And it's created, I think created by, at least definitely heavily contributed to by a former coworker of mine, whose name I'm going to butcher, which is Loita, who used to work at Formation, or not actually work, he was consulting at Formation, because he also created, was it GHCJS? And so he was doing a lot of work on that for Formation. So these are just some of the projects. There's definitely a ton. There's had to be like 30 people who got up and like, gave their pitch for different things. Oh, one of the other neat projects was Waterfall CAD, which is a way for doing 3D modeling in Haskell, which I had done with using some other tool. I forget what it's called now, but I had a great conversation with the author of Waterfall CAD about like why I might choose Waterfall over the tool I was already using. And I mean, I do very trivial like 3D modeling stuff, and I didn't really know But I did learn that I hate using things like Blender and very much prefer writing Haskell code. Um, and uh, and so I kind of, pulled together what I could on my own. But like talking to this guy was whose name escapes me, unfortunately. But it was very helpful in me like deciding how I should go forward with like projects I've been doing. Um, okay, next slide. Next slide. Sorry. Why is my slides are not moving? Here we go. Let me see where. Okay, cool. Yeah. So and the main thing that I get out of conference like ZuriHac is just the talking to people, throughout the whole thing. This is definitely a small subset of the people I talk to, but yeah, some of the interesting conversations I had. Um, I didn't know he was coming, but a friend of mine and someone I've worked with at two different companies, both at Formation and then at Kitty Hawk, which is or was a autonomous aircraft company that used Haskell actually as the for the control software on their planes, which was an amazing place to work. So I worked with Ziyang at those two companies, and he now works at IOG. Um, and I keep in touch with him, but I had no idea he was coming to ZuriHac, and so it was cool to see him and talk about. So he was working on HLint stuff, I believe at Zero. Oh no, actually, he did no hacking at all at ZuriHac this year, which is effectively where I was too. But but I was trying to get some hacking done. But again, the conversations made it all worthwhile. There's Alexi was there, who's also at IOG. IOG made up, I think, about 10% of the conference. I think they had like 40 people from IOG there, and maybe I don't know if nobody I knew at Mercury, and I didn't see any Mercury like anybody with name tags that said Mercury or anything. So I don't know if it's just because it was European, but I didn't see anybody from Mercury there, and I saw like 40 people from, or well, there were like 40 people from IOG there. Um, and for those who don't know, IOG is like the Cardano blockchain and other things, but um, they're quite a large Haskell employer. And so Alexei was there, who is in Boulder like half the year. He's currently in Belarus, but so it's cool to see him too because he hasn't been in a Haskell meetup in a while, and especially now we're not doing them in person. But yeah, at the first night at dinner, I had this great conversation with these two Germans um, who use Haskell in no visible way. Like from their company, you wouldn't, have any idea they're using Haskell, but they use it internally at their PR firm, which I thought was very interesting and kind of confusing that that was a thing that happened. But it's like one of those things, right? You hire a person who is like interested in doing Haskell and knows doing Haskell, and especially like not a tech forward company, like where that's like their main thing, there's a lot less pressure on like what those decisions are and things like that as long as things work. And so, they were able to choose to do Haskell and love it. But it's not something that like is, even probably most of their coworkers have any idea about because it's not a tech company. They're just using it. So I love those kind of stories because, I feel like there's a lot of that kind of thing where it's just kind of invisible and internal, but you never know what's at that layer. Um, yeah, I mentioned already that I talked to the author of Waterfall CAD, whose name escapes me, and that was very helpful. Cass is someone I've known on at least Mastodon. I don't know if I'm familiar with them on any other platform, but I've just known online. We've had various interactions on Mastodon and stuff. They're a researcher actually in recursion schemes, largely, which is really cool. It's something I'm very interested in. And so we had multiple conversations over multiple days about their research in recursion schemes. They're doing a lot of stuff with like basically proving a lot of termination things and doing everything. I think they're doing everything. Yeah, doing everything in Agda to prove everything. And so there's a lot of cool work there. I started like basically like reading all their papers and stuff like that, and just kind of checking out some of the cool research that's going on and seeing how it maps to some of the things that I've been doing. And one of the things that was interesting to me is that there's this technique when you're using recursion schemes that I saw a lot of people doing, like I think probably still do early on. Um, and I was always like, oh no, that's the wrong way to do it because when you do it that way, you lose the proof that like you're dealing with a finite structure. So the result, you don't know is finite anymore. Like, you've lost that proof. So now you're just dealing with like a potentially infinite structure, which, changes the things you're allowed to do with it. Um, and and so I recommended like here's a different approach called like attribute grammars that change the way that you move through the thing, but it preserves that proof all the way through. And one of the things that Cass has been working on is actually how to prove that the kind of obvious or intuitive thing that people are adopting that I was like saying, oh, don't do that, but trying to actually make it so you do maintain a proof through that approach that it is a finite structure, and which is they call recursive coalgebras, which are coalgebras unfolds, or yeah, they which normally use unfolds, but used in a way that you can see that it terminates in a finite number of steps. So anyway, that's really cool research, and it kind of is like it's great because I really like that sort of thing where the obvious thing is the right thing to do, basically, right? Like it's so often in programming, like, oh, I do this thing, and then everybody will tell you like why that's wrong, right? Like it's like, oh no, that run into this security issue or this performance issue or whatever, and so like here are the hoops you have to jump through to like make it efficient or make it safe or whatever. And so anytime that you can like get rid of that and like make the obvious thing the actually correct thing is like a huge win in my opinion. And that's the kind of thing that I like to think about in general in like work I do. And it comes up in like my stuff on duoids, for example, that there's just write things the obvious way and it will work, the optimal way. And so I feel like this research kind of fits into that thing. It lets people write things the way that they might come up with on their own. So anyway, great conversations there. Cass is also actually in Boulder, I think, starting today for PLDI, which is a programming languages conference happening right across the street from CU. And so there's a lot of a programming language conference happening like right here in Boulder, like right now. Although it's an academic conference, so it's pretty expensive. I think the ticket is like $1,300. And whereas ZuriHac, the conference itself is free. I mean, you have to pay for flights and hotels and stuff, but there's no charge for the conference, which is really great. And I want to mention also that a few months ago there was AmeriHac, which is the first kind of American version of ZuriHac. So it was in New York. The weather in Zurich was much better now in June than the weather was in New York for AmeriHac. It was like -10 Fahrenheit for the whole time we were there. So you kind of like ran as fast as you could to be indoors all the time. You really lose a lot of that like outside kind of, people just kind of forming groups and figuring out where they're going and conversations happening in that, which is too bad, but due to the weather. But AmeriHac was also good, and I'm looking forward to that next year, especially because it's here in the US, so easy to get to and also free. Um, Tom is somebody that I've had a lot of conversations with online recently. This is the first time I've met him in person. He runs NixCI, which is mentioning Garnix shutting down earlier. NixCI is an alternative, although currently it only runs builds on x86 Linux, and so no Apple builds or no ARM builds or things like that. So hopefully that build machines will spread or whatever. But also, I think it's easier to self-host workers. So if you have those machines, you can set up your own build machines to do that stuff too. But NixCI is a potential alternative for the stuff I've been doing on Garnix. I'm looking to see how much more I can push that forward. He also, and that's implemented in Haskell, and there's a number of Haskell libraries and stuff out. One that's come up at this meetup before is optemconf, which sort of combines handling command line options, environment variables, and config files all in like one kind of, declarative format where you can kind of unify all those things in your code base and handle them all nice and consistently together. It's a tool I use in anything that needs that kind of any application that I create. And he has a bunch of other projects too. Every time we talk, like as we're talking in this conversation, he's like, "Oh, you're doing this thing. Oh, here's a project I have for that. Oh, here's a project I have for that." So he just has so many things, and like I just have a list of just his projects that I need to like dig into. I already mentioned Loita and his Haskell debugger stuff project. We had a good conversation. And Fabrizio, who is currently a PureScript maintainer. So we had a good conversation about, again, my recent use of PureScript and, like what I think works so well with PureScript, including things like row types. And he's also a former DAL user contributor, and I still use DAL. I hold on to that so tight. I still think it's like one of the best languages out there. So whenever I talk to somebody who's ever used it, they're always like, "Wait, you're still using it? Like, how are you doing that?" So that's always a good conversation. And like, yeah, like what am I doing it for? And also with PureScript, I had this come up a couple times, surprisingly, at this conference, but just I have a personal way of handling or the way that I like to do ad hoc polymorphism in tools and languages that I create, which is different from say type class. So type classes is how it's done in Haskell, and there's other approaches in other languages. But but I've put together an implementation of mine in Idris 1. It doesn't actually work in Idris 2, but PureScript is like a good portion of the way to having that same sort of ad hoc polymorphism as an option because of its support for row types. Um, so anyway, trying to talk Fabrizio into how to fill in the gaps and make it so that's a viable option. Um, but yeah, this was really, this slide, I know it's all on one slide here, but is really the core of the conference for me. I mean, just like every time I turn around, like running into somebody else, somebody that I recognize and I want to talk to them about something, or someone who like, recognizes me or overhears a conversation we're having and, jumps in. And it's just like, this conference is so good at that. And it's just like, yeah, it's really great for making those connections and, finding opportunities if you're looking for work in Haskell and stuff like that, just by getting those ins and figuring out who's working where. Definitely, some of the companies, the sponsors and stuff, are hiring Haskellers, um, and yeah, I can talk if somebody is curious. I can bring up some of those options. But yeah, you can go to the next slide. I just wanted to the next few slides, just like you can just go the next two or slides forward like slowly. This is just where the conference is. This is literally across the street from the conference. These three photos. It's so gorgeous. And then one more. Yeah, so it was this great. A lot. I didn't go myself, but a lot of people went swimming during the conference. They just hop in the lake right there. So the water was nice and warm, and yeah, it was just a great place to be to hang out outside, have conversations in this park and stuff like that, or in the park from the previous photo. Um, But yeah, you want to go to the next slide? So that's it. It was really a blast. I had a great time. This is a chocolate bar that the hotel gave me, which was also great, Swiss chocolate. And yeah, so I mean that's kind of everything. Whatever bunch of stuff there, but I hope you can see kind of how much is going on. I mean, and again, I only have this small slice of what I experienced there, but it's a lot. And again, you can go there as a beginner, and there's beginner talks, or beginner track every day, getting people up to speed and helping them get started on getting on the projects, and plenty of advanced talks that I didn't go to. There's a category theory track on the third day. Um, and there's just too much to do for sure. Even it seems, on the one hand, it seems kind of small and very close, tight knit or whatever, but on the other hand, it's just like there's so much happening. So it was a really great experience. Yeah, so you can stop sharing now, Robert.
I'm trying. Stop navigator. And how do I stop navigator? Let me exit this.
I'm gonna put my email address in the chat. I realized I didn't even put it on a slide or anything. If I can find the window. Just if anybody and like I mentioned, there's companies there that I've taken notes on that are hiring for Haskellers, and I know others otherwise. And if there's any projects that you like that I mentioned, and I didn't really get to share web pages and the kind of details of that stuff, but I can, if you can, yeah. Once I share my email address, anybody can let me know that they want more information about something I've mentioned. So there's my email, and also I am. Uh, see if I get this right, my Mastodon account. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about any of these things or more. There's more people I talked to that I didn't even get onto the slides and stuff, but I had a great time. So yeah, anybody
So
curious about anything?
you talked about a bunch of presentations were about adopting functional programming, learning functional programming, and stuff like this, right? Is
Yeah.
was like elephant
Was there
dream.
technical talks? Is that what
No,
you're? Oh.
was AI mentioned in this talk?
Oh,
Because
oh, actually,
seems
this is a
like
good. So AI was generally not mentioned in those talks. I mean, it might have been mentioned in passing in one or two places. Um, I'm sure the talk on how to stop using Haskell brought it up at some point briefly, and
mhm,
the teaching Haskell one also brought it up. Probably all of them have mentioned at some point, but there was added last minute, like during the conference itself, there was a panel on LLMs and LLM usage added to the program. I didn't go to that.
mhm.
I don't know if that'll be published, like if that was recorded like the talks were and will be published along with the other things. If so, I'll probably watch it. Um, I felt like at least at the time that was not a room I wanted to be in. Although I heard that the talks were quite civil and productive, the
Mm,
discussion. So I'm curious because apparently at one of the prelude events, the either the implementers workshop or the ecosystem workshop, there was also a panel about or some kind of thing about LLMs, and it was more contentious, more of a battle there than the one at ZuriHac proper. But I was not at either of them. But yeah, there was that, and I think because it was added to the schedule, it kind of um, cause people to maybe not bring it up as much as they would other in all the other contexts otherwise because they did have that dedicated space. Um,
mhm.
There's so many projects and discussions. Do you feel like you came away with more of a focus on the things that you want to work on, or like now there's even so many more things?
that's a great question. I think so. I have a ton of projects anyway. Like my project graph is massive, and I have projects that are like projects about managing my project graph and stuff like that. So I mean, I'm definitely unfocused in general. But I do think like there were I have my own separate notes about like um, let me see if it's in this list. Um, it's not there. It's maybe on this one. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Here. There's basically a couple things that came up repeatedly for about stuff that I had done or was doing.
Mhm.
Um, that kind of so that to me gave me some more focus because I knew then what people were interested in or of the stuff that I've been doing because I don't always get good feedback with that sort of thing. And so being there and having people asking me questions about one of my projects or another project. So I think I did come away with good focus. I mean, it's not like, oh, it's this one thing. It's definitely still multiple things, but I have so many things that like even that is such an improvement over like, okay, these are the things that are making an impact. And I think like can help people and I can improve and make it easier for people to use them. So yeah, I think I did come up with more focus myself. There's definitely a lot of the other stuff that I learned about and that I'm very interested in that's not my own um, is less about, for the most part, less about me working on it and more like, oh, that's a really useful tool. Because a lot of the stuff that comes
Mhm.
up at this conference is about like the tooling. Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people do want to contribute to at some level. Because everybody uses GHC. Most people use the language server at some level, and so when you're using these tools all the time, you like kind of either maybe just want to fix the bugs that you're seeing, or, some behavior to make it do what you want to do, or it's kind of high profile if you make changes to there that you're like, oh, I'm a contributor to GHC, like that's significant, right? That's not like a trivial piece of software. And so I think those things do get a lot of draw, but for me, it's like I discovering new tools that I want to be using as a user more than necessarily like, oh, I want to be because I have plenty of things to be involved with already. And so I'm just like, oh, this seems really cool. I should get like, I like adopt that and start using that. So that I feel like it doesn't affect my focus so much. I mean, there is definitely a period of distraction or loss of productivity when I'm adopting a tool and kind of integrating it into stuff. But I think it overall, hopefully pays off for the things that seem particularly useful or interesting. So I
Yeah,
don't think of that as like subtracting from my focus, really.
yeah, that makes sense. Although I'm like wanting to learn this verse language to see what that's all about, just from your
Yeah,
talk
I mean,
now. So,
it seems really cool, but I don't know. Like, I mean, I do have to look more to see because it's something that from the first time I heard about it was like, oh, and there are papers about the verse calculus and like all this kind of core stuff, which I'm
mhm.
sure has changed a lot since that first paper came out. But I don't know that you can like download verse and like play with it. Maybe you can, but I haven't. Uh, yeah, I haven't done that yet.
That's cool.
You mentioned Haskell Inspector, which this is a kind of a debugger, right? Project, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm not very familiar with Haskell. I don't use Haskell debugger, and I wonder, is it really works very well in sort of I/O monad, or this is more, is it good outside of it? I just wonder
Wait.
how how the, you know, highly optimized lazy
Right.
evaluation language can be sequentially, you know, like very in a very sequential way, stepped over the
Yeah. So I don't know. I think so. Like I mentioned, the two different things. So the Haskell inspector, which one of the interesting things is that it doesn't require instrumentation of your source code or anything like that, or of your bytecode or anything.
mm,
It's just like done on the binary. So that to me seems like it would have more issues with that because like you're going to get, you know, the compiled execution, like that order is going to be like kind of somewhat sorted out already at that level. But the other project, which I haven't used myself yet either, the Haskell stepwise debugger, which is kind of like an official ish Haskell project. I think like Haskell Foundation's involved, and like I said, Mercury has people working on it, stuff like that. Is meant to be, I think, like a pretty strict. By strict, I mean like strict versus lazy, strict like stepwise debugger, so that you can go through code in the way that your brain thinks that it's going to execute and see actually how things change in that order. Like I think it just kind of subverts the laziness, but yeah, it means you're explicitly like running, you know, instrumented and debuggable code, and rather than just Haskell as it was meant to be necessarily. But I haven't used it, but I know that like there's been a lot of effort going into that recently to have a real stepwise debugger. And I know one of the reasons I haven't used it is I'm pretty sure it only currently compiles on x86 Linux, which I do have machines, but I still primarily use a Mac, and so it's just like not on my general workflow.
mm.
And so I haven't gotten to use that yet.
That's interesting. That may actually give us maybe somewhat better equivalence of a trace, of a call stack.
Yeah, right.
Um, um, which also suffers from the same sort of limitation. Like it's hard to go outside of IO with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and also, I mean, it changes the semantics of the program, right, to some extent. Like, so yeah, I mean, I
yeah,
haven't gotten to use it yet, but it seems
yeah. Like think about like I don't know, like some sort of some sort um, uh, 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 of effect system, right? Where the interpreter and the code are completely divorced. It's how do you step over interpreted code? That doesn't even make my brain whirls when
yeah, no, I
hurts
agree.
when I
There's a
try
lot
to
of
think about it, right?
parts of it I don't understand. Yeah,
That seems
but
like
yeah.
not possible. Oh, maybe it is possible. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I mean, not the because I haven't used it yet, and I'm very interested in using it. But like, yeah, the problem is, I mean, like, even with any debugger, I feel like there's always those mysterious things, like, oh, if I have this, you know, even if I just had like printf debugging or whatever, I just have this print here and it works. When I take that print out, it doesn't work for some reason, and it's like, you know, you get all these kind of like mysterious side effects. And so when you start then being like, oh, we're going to step through this as if it were a strict program, so you're like
well,
definitely like changing semantics and stuff like that. Like you're gonna have even more of those kinds of problems where it's like, oh, I debug it and it just works fine. But then when I just run it without debugging and it, you know, operates lazily, oh, something wasn't forced in the right place and like whatever, like I don't.
you
So
think
yeah,
of it as kind of wrong principally, right? Because it's not imperative code you're stepping over. So
yeah,
so by stepping over stuff, you mean it's imperative. So, so
right.
right? So that's sort of like should I don't know.
I need to figure out like what I forget what the repo is for that. Okay. Oh yeah, here it is. It's the repo is it's on GitHub. It's own. I'm going to share it. So it's this URL loads. It's the project is under well typed, and it's called Haskell Debugger, and I'm sharing the link there in the chat. Yeah. So for anybody who wants to see more about it. But like I said, I think it says like right at the beginning of the README that like it only works on it's only on GHC 9.14. Oh, maybe that was the thing. Maybe it wasn't x86 Linux. Maybe it was just that it was 9.14. And all of my stuff, I primarily am on 9.10 for things. So maybe that was the issue, not the hardware platform. But anyway, yeah. interesting project for sure. And like I said, if anyone is looking for Haskell work or whatever, I did various companies mentioned it. I took some notes on who was hiring. Let's see if I can just like at least read through that a second. Where is the right thing here? Circuit Hub, which they make like I think like fabrication machines or something like that. I forget exactly what they do, but that's done in Haskell. They're hiring. Wire, the messaging platform, is hiring. IOHK or IOG is hiring. Jane Street, which doesn't do Haskell, but they do OCaml. And um, yeah, which is pretty similar to Haskell. I think they write in a fairly Haskell flavored variant of OCaml. And so yeah, so Jane Street is in New York, and they're hiring as well. So those are the ones I have listed right here, at least. And I think I know a couple others, but I don't have them on this list. But um, yeah, so if anybody does want to get in the Haskell work or back into Haskell work or whatever.
You mentioned that you found it unusual for this for this like non-open source Haskell use, right? There was this you mentioned that you talked to
Oh,
people
the
who
PR
just
company,
right.
that one.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I just think I don't know if it's unusual. I mean, maybe it's so common. Maybe most Haskell projects are just internal projects that no one external to the company sees, for all I know. Um, but yeah, anyway, do you have a question around that or?
well, yeah, I just wonder how how common situation like this is. I
Yeah.
actually imagine that it may be easier to introduce Haskell to a non-software, a non-technical company where software is kind of more like nobody cares, so we can as well do it in Haskell, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to hey, we really care, yeah, therefore we have to do it in Java, right? Um, so um, a lot of this stuff, the decisions are sort of made like this. Um, I wonder, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like the thing is, of course, it's so hard to see those companies. Like even if there's job listings and stuff. I mean, yeah, I don't. I mean, maybe they would call out Haskell in job listings. I don't know. Like, but definitely is, like under the radar. And it would be cool if those companies, could open source parts of things and get. But anyway, like I don't. Yeah, I don't know how much of this stuff is just invisible inside companies that someone got interested in Haskell and decided to use it for something, and nobody at the company has any clue because it's not a tech company. I hope it happens all the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I don't know too many examples, maybe except for my employer, which doesn't have an open source. Um,
right.
they sort of had some open source stuff that the Jason published in his own GitHub, but that's sort of not maintained and kind of abandoned mostly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, everybody should go to ZuriHac next year. Oh, and this year there's also in October, early October, there is Munihack in Munich. So you can go for Oktoberfest at the end of September and then stay for Munihack. Um, but I don't know if I'll get to go to that one, but it'd be cool if I do. But yeah, so that's the next opportunity.
I will stop recording.